Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're actually going to take a look at something we haven't done before, and that is painting buildings. In front of you here you have the unpainted house or ruined house that you see here. That is actually from a board game called Citadel Heroes that I've been painting a bit before. This is from the Terrain Pack 2 expansion, and this is what it looks like unpainted, straight out of the box. Grey, plastic, quite detailed, really nice. We're going to take this building here that you see and turn it into something a little bit better. So stay with me. I'm going to switch over to a pre-primed figure or building that I've done before, and this is what it looks like when I primed it in white. If you have any questions about priming, please see my video in the description box for how to prime a miniature, and that makes sure if you do that the paint will actually stick better to the plastic. So it's primed in white, and I've also primed the inside of the buildings here as well. So I'm not going to be painting the inside of the building. I'm only going to be focusing on the outside. That's what you actually see. I'm going to leave the insides pure white with a spray can primer, simply because I want it to look very kind of worn and dirty and like war torn. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint all the surface areas, every surface areas around the entire building with a color called from Vallejo called white grey, and we're going to dilute it with a little bit of water. So I'm going to put it onto my palette. I'm going to give the bottle a bit of a shake, and I'm going to cover one side of this building initially. So I have my water pot over here. I'm going to put it a little bit of just one brushful of water, and I'm going to put it out over here and simply mix it around. I'm using a fairly large brush for this, but you can use a smaller brush if you want to as well. And you do so, I simply pretty much cover the entire area here. Don't worry if you cover some of the masonry or brick masonry here or some of the sides. It's going to be covered up in the next stage anyways. So you just cover one stage like this, and that's to make sure that the building doesn't look pure white, but this one has a little bit of grey tone in it, and it's to make sure that we actually get a little bit of a color variation of the building. Now, I'm not going to cover the entire building here, well, maybe I will, just to make sure that you can see it. And it's very easy, just cover the entire model like this. You can do one or you can do two layers of this one if you feel for it. And as you can see here, the color variation is much better if you actually put it in pure in grey white grey instead of just the primer. It's a very easy way to do this, and the reason I'm placing it in white instead of like a grey or beige color is that it contrasts really well with the brick masonry that we're going to see in later on. And after, also you could paint this brownish or beige, that also works really well. But I've chosen white because my other main buildings, the ones that are not ruined from Terrain Pack 1, are in white. So I want them to look very similar. And also it will be, another reason for this is that they will work really well in the winter camouflage and the winter maps that you have in the map packs of Citadel Heroes, the board game, published by Bad Crow Games. And this is what it looks like, very easy. You can cover the sides that you've been holding it with your thumb. Underneath here. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, I've already pre-painted the next stage, which we're going to go through, and I will tell you this. It's probably not completely dry now, but I will tell you this. I'm not going to cover this stage, but I will tell you that this is what it's going to look like when you've actually painted the next stage. And this is what it looks like when it's dried. You can see that the finish is much better than compared to before. Right now we're going to paint these edges here, like some kind of brickwork or something like that. And what we're going to do is that we're going to cover them with a paint called Neutral Grey from Vallejo. I've chosen this one because it contrasts well with the shade we're going to add on later on. So I'm going to paint this undiluted, even though you might actually want to add a tiny bit of water. And I'm only going to show you how to paint one side, but I'm painting both sides of this one. So you just put them on with a fine tipped brush here. You can also use it with a larger brush. Okay, my camera dropped a little bit, that happens. Something like this, and you turn it around, you paint the other side. Very easy, contrasts really well. If you were to touch some of the brickwork or masonry, not a problem, we can cover it over with a shade and do some touching up later on as we go along. The point here is not to win any competitions, just to make sure that it looks fairly well on the tabletop and that you have fun painting. And don't forget to cover the top spots here as well, the corners. You can leave them white as well if you want to, but I prefer to touch them up. Something like this, okay? Now, with that said, we're right now going to go into a little bit more difficult stage. We're going to paint the brickworks. And for that, I've chosen to use 3 different colours. I'm going to use game colour from Vallejo called Orange Fire. I'm also going to use another one from game colour from Vallejo called Orange. And from the same model range, this one is actually an air colour, but it's a little bit thinner than normal, so I like that because it blends out well with the paint. And I'm also using a Gory Red from Vallejo. And finally, I'm putting in a tiny bit of Yriel Yellow from Citadel. And just a tiny, tiny hint, not even a brushful, not even close to it, just even like the tip of a needle or something like that. You get the, with either glossy black from Vallejo or regular black. So with those things, I'm going to mix them out now in my palette, give the paint bottles a good shake, and you can see that it will be a nice, even kind of red, brickish, brick coloured paint. So I'm going to show you how to put them out over here. Mix them in together. There's some bubbles there as well. And then finally for the Gory Red, popping those bubbles. It's quite dominant Gory Red, so I'm using a smaller amount of it. And finally for the Yriel Yellow, and not in camera because I'm opening this one so you can see it. Just a tiny amount, just something like this. And you mix around the colours. The aim is to get a kind of like orange reddish colour. The black is very optional. I'm choosing not to put the black in right now because I'm fairly happy with the colour, but if you feel it's too light, you can add a tiny, tiny amount of black, but be careful with it because it might actually overdo it. And then you have to start the mixing all over again. So I'm using a fine tip brush for this one because I want to make sure that the brickwork is covered in a nice way. And it's fairly fluid, so I'm not diluting this paint with water or anything. And as you can see, it has brickwork, has in all these recesses, it's brickwork. So I'm going to show on this side because there the brickwork shows really well. So I'm going to make sure I'm painting it quite well over here. Try to make sure you don't touch any of the surrounding white areas. It's a little bit difficult, but since it is a ruin, it's not really much, doesn't really make much of a difference if you do. A tip here is to actually go over the model, carefully and see where the brickwork actually shows, so you don't miss any spots, because that's what I did when I started painting mine. And as you can see here, the brickwork really makes these models pop. Well, I'm not going to paint the whole model here that I've done previously, but I'm just going to angle this one so I get to it. This is what it will look like when you start painting them. I'm going to show you what it looks like when I finish it, because I've already pre-painted one, and then it will look pretty much like this with the sides here painted in grey, and that's what it will be. With this one done, I'm going to cleaning my brush after everything. I'm actually going to raise the camera here, hopefully it will stay. If it pops down again, I guess that's what we'll have to do. Let me see if I can get this one up. Right, I adjusted my camera, sorry about that. Right now we are going to do a black wash, and it's very easy. Taking a black shade or black wash, call it whatever you want, from Vallejo. You can also use non-oil from Citadel. I'm using it fairly undiluted, and I'm going to show you a very good and easy technique that I've showed you before in other models. I'm going to use a flat brush for this one, fairly old one. I'm going to use a little bit of water to dilute it, and then wiping off some of the shade from the brush, I'm going to simply do it and streak it all over the entire model, including the brickworks. Making it pool a little bit in the recesses, but not too much. Especially what you want here is you want the edges here to be quite well covered. Before it gets getting to pool too much, I'm taking a cotton cloth and slowly pulling some of the stuff in a downward manner to make sure that it kind of like gives you a rain streaked look. We'll continue doing this for the rest of them so you can see how it's done. Painting downwards in a firm motion. And then wiping some, but not all of the wash off. It helps with the drying time as well, that's a nice bonus. And then the other side here. Finally, for the last side, I'll refill my shade a little bit. If you feel that it's getting too light, you can easily just redo a stage without any issues, like I do here, with a smaller amount of shade on the brush. And it does a really nice way of contrasting things. And that's what it looks like. If you feel like this is the look you're aiming for, you can actually finish this model right now, let it dry, and it's ready for the table. You can put some varnish on it to make sure that the paint sticks, but otherwise this one is ready to go. If you want to hang out around for a little longer, and I'll show you some more ways to highlight it up, stick around, and that means I can show you a few more tricks. Now this is what a finished model after it's dried looking like. That's what it looks like. It looks quite dirty right now, and what I want to do is I want to point out some of these brick masonry areas, because that's where it will really pop. So I'm using the same color again, and I'm putting in a tiny amount covering over some of the areas where it's been where some of the paint has been like overshadowed with it, if that makes any sense. It makes sure also that these areas will stand out more on the table, and that's what I want people to look at. What you can also do, if you want to, if you think it's too dark, you can actually dry brush the white over with the same color, overlay gray white over some of the white areas in a light dry brush. Something like this. This is what it looks on one side. Looks quite okay. What you can also do, you can also see these pipes here. I think there are pipes. I'm going to paint them with oily steel from Vallejo, or natural steel. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm not going to go into painting these ones as well. After that one, I'm going to touch up some of the white areas here where I feel that it stands out a little bit too much. And here I have some natural steel. It doesn't really stand out that much, but I feel it's a tiny amount that actually does a little bit of a difference. You can paint these in copper as well if you like. That's also fine. Now I'm going to show you how to touch up some of the grey areas using same neutral grey as before. I'm going to use this one here, the side here, filling in some of these. Not touching all of it, I'm going to leave some of the shades here. And you can do the same on your model. As you can see, I'm leaving some of the shade, perhaps it's not showing that well. You can also, if you don't want that, you can also dry brush it over it. And that concludes this painting video for the Ruined Houses from Cabinet of Heroes, the board games, Terrain Pack 2. As you can see, I'm not actually painting the entire model, but I'm giving you an idea of how you can actually paint it, shorten the video a little bit. If you like this video, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing to my channel. It really helps it grow and really would make me really happy. With that said, go and put some paint on those models, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.